Alright, so let's go over a little bit of the gear that I normally use for this. And actually here, why don't I do it from scratch? We'll go over the build first, so I'll just walk you through it with a token real quick. So, in conjunction with the gear while I go over this, in relation to my stat allocation, I do use a Widowmaker on swap. Yeah, I'm that guy. Preferably used for people who are evading consistently and staying at a certain distance to where I can at least interact with them with this bow, just to get a little bit more chip damage in there. Nothing really serious. Like, I don't have an rune in there. It makes it very slow, although that would be quite useful. Sometimes that deals a lot of damage with the open wounds. But in terms of the statistics, I require 146 dexterity. That's the only point up I'm going to do in terms of anything aside from vitality. So 146, dump the rest into vitality. So the thing about this character that I'm using right now, it is heavily hybridized, I will say. So because of that, you'll notice here, what I'm going to do is grab Summon Grizzly, and I also use every single Summon Spirit that is available to a Druid. I really wish I could use Poison Creeper still, but unfortunately, due to the frame rate issues, that's not going to be happening anytime soon, probably. Let's go back to the main build for the Fire Tree. Since I've dumped points into Summon Grizzly already, you'll notice this is a physical damage-centered fire build. So, Armageddon, if you take notice here, it lists damage of 3680 to 3928, and then fire damage. So that specific damage spell right there, that it's listing that damage range, is raw physical damage, like you would get out of a Wind Druid or a Smiter, etc. You know what I mean? So it actually has been boosted significantly since the 2.4 patch change, and this build in specific is geared around those synergies that apply to the physical damage only, because pure fire damage alone is fairly resistible, right? If that's the case, why not circumcede that and just go straight to the punch with physical damage only? So that's why we're going for those synergies. So Volcano is Molten Boulder, Fissure, and Armageddon. Fissure does deal a little bit of damage here for it, but I'm still sacrificing it in lieu of the pure damage it does and the usefulness that it actually has in PvP comparatively with Firestorm and the other spells that I use. So generally I use Firestorm against an assassin who's trying to stomp and fire blast me, or trying to close the distance on like a trapper. Like, that's a very useful spell to have in that circumstance. That is the only spell that a druid has that is totally unblockable by claw block, weapon block on an assassin. So very useful, and honestly, you have to think about it this way. So if you count the skill itself as a synergy in terms of how much damage it's going to be able to apply and boost on its own, basically, I'm about almost 2/3, or 2 out of 3 synergies fulfilled, correct? So even if I were to go a different direction and put the same amount of points into Firestorm, into Fissure instead, it just doesn't really seem like a comparable choice when I lose out on Firestorm damage overall, because then it just shifts the synergies around in a way where they aren't cohesive to the way I play the character personally. Like, boosting Firestorm also boosts Molten Boulder, and if you'll notice on the synergy listing for Armageddon, Fissure is just a duration boost. So not really useful in my mind if I'm just trying to deal raw damage overall and I have to hybridize my character. I have to drop points from something, right? So honestly, in my mind, that's the most logical choice. I've run a lot of variations of this hybrid, including one that has Fire Claws for a very long time, and I did the same role there, maxing the other spells in the tree and just leaving that where it lay. And I'm used to that. A lot of people won't recommend it. They'll be like, hey, max Fissure, go full 20-20-20 out of everything in the fire tree. But in terms of building a Shaman Druid, which is a hybrid fire and summon Druid, this is where you start off. So next, I really love Werebear, one of my favorite skills. But let's go back over to the elemental tree for a second. We're going to add a point in everything all the way through Hurricane. And let's take a look at Twister here a little more closely. The stun duration on this Now, if you'll notice, Arctic Blast as a synergy has a 20% duration per level increase. So, let's put a couple points into Arctic Blast, right? Like 0.4 seconds isn't enough. I think closer to 1 second overall for stun duration in human form sounds kind of nice, don't you? So with the rest of my points, I'm just going to devote everything into Firestorm. Boom. Done. All right. Now let's go over the gear. Versus a Necromancer, this is what I would traditionally wear. Here, let me just zoom in here. This is my Suicide Branch. I have a 7 FHR, 9 Strength, 4 Rep Life, and I believe it's 19 Fire Res or 29? 29, I believe. Jewel in there. And that works very well for me. I'm very comfortable with this setup. It's what I normally use, and I've been accustomed to for quite some time now in terms of playing just a caster variant of a Fire Druid. Next, here's the hat. I love my hat. There's a couple variants of this that you can also roll. That's a 100% perfect. Doesn't have to be 100% perfect to play this character. If you are interested in playing this character, don't feel obligated to like max out and invest or anything. If you're just looking to dabble and try it out and see if it's for you, just pick up a nice little convenient set. I'll go over an additional set after this that's more convenient and relative to like a beginner player. So here's my amulet of choice. Basically always have this equipped. In DFC, the amount of rep life you're allowed to have is 40. Quite a vast difference from most of the other leagues. So I keep it at 40 generally, and if I go to the other leagues to compete at all, I just swap this ring right here for one without any rep. But yeah, that's the amulet. Boom, done. Hey, it's a spirit. An imperfect spirit gets the job done for me. I love it. There's my boots. Blood Spur, just some blood boots. Always useful to have a little bit of life steal against characters who have like summons. You kill the summons, you get a little bit of life back. Helps with your rep. Good to have. You don't have to have that. You can get away with Sandstorm Treks if you would really like to. I keep a pair in the stash myself. There's a variety of options you can have for the boots. I'm wearing an Eric's just for a belt. Gets me to the 163 breakpoint I need, as well as the rings. Here's the one ring, decent. And the other one that I normally use helps me hit everything I need to in terms of wearing all my equipment with minimal stat allocation to strength and dexterity. These are my mage fists. They're double upped. Yours don't have to be. They don't even have to be mage fists. Go get some trangs. Who cares? Slap something on that gets you moving around. Try it out. All right, Grand Charms. I prefer using a full inventory of elemental Grand Charms. The cube, obviously, that's because I have a bow and I need to swap for a CTA. Also, conveniently enough, Suicide Branch and Wizard Spike are the same size, so since it's so small, why not just keep it in the cube there, eh? You know what I mean? Back to the inventory. All right, for Necromancer, I'm not really going to be focused on resistance, really, unless the guy's got, like, Fire Golem or something up, at which point Cyclone Armor, even at one point, will generally take care of it. It only absorbs 338 damage in this setup because it's 1 point investment with 1 point investment to its synergies for the most part. So, that's about enough to soak a Fist of the Heavens hit from a Paladin, like a VT spec Paladin. So just enough to get you by. Not really reliable against any other heavy elemental class. It'll alleviate a little bit of damage that you're going to take, but that's about it. So in lieu of that and the lack of use for it, in specific with the Necromancer fight, I've also stepped away from using my resistance charms. And there's a 451 I keep for the bow, just to tag people with chip damage. And here's my torch, 2020, get a 2020 Annie. All set. If I wasn't using the cube, I would just have another one of these. And it's right there. It's magic, yeah. All right. In terms of a normal setup for someone starting out and just like collecting items, let's talk about faster cast rate a little bit. So I really like having the maximum amount of speed and mobility on any character that I'm going to use, especially if it's a caster. You need to be able to move around and interact with people without taking damage. Most of them are quite squishy. Unfortunately, because of my build choice, but fortunately for me, I don't really mind it. My oak is very low, so let's go take a look at that real quick. After BO, I've only got about 5k HP. A lot different from a Windy Druid. If I was wind spec, probably 8.2k HP with my own BO. You got max oak, it's great. But in lieu of that, we're playing something more similar to like a decently built assassin or a paladin in terms of a life pool with their own oak. You know what I mean? So, taking that into consideration, I want speed. So that's why I opt for the 163% breakpoint for my faster cast rate. I overshot mine by 2%. Doesn't have to be perfect. You can honestly play this thing with a 99 setup. I personally don't do it. It is not my preferred choice. I feel very sluggish when I use 99% faster cast rate. Not ideal. But yeah. This right here, let's just go over a basic setup. Suicide Branch. Forget about the jewel. Very cheap on its own. Socket it with whatever you want. You could even put a facet in there if you really want. Koa. Probably the most useful piece that you'll have in terms of fighting multiple classes and being able to stay like pretty well healthy during the fight. So not entirely useful for assassins, even though the damage reduction does reduce Mind Blast damage. You'll get a lot further in terms of a DFC rule set, mind you. I'll mention that now. Integer damage reduction. There is a limit in many tournaments. DFC, I don't know if we really have a limit on integer damage reduction. And what I mean by integer damage reduction is this nomination of damage reduced by 32. So let's compare that to what you normally see out of damage reduction on an item. On Crown of Ages, you get a percentage reduction. Physical damage received reduced by 31% overall. It's great for melee and every other physical damage dealing class, but if you're focusing on Mind Blast, at some point, if you're within the DFC rule set or a rule set that allows integer damage reduction, highly recommend getting a little bit of it. Very useful. Can bring Mind Blast down to like 4 to 20 damage. 420, yeah, great. What do we got here? Yo, Mike, I got you. I got you. Here. This is long overdue. Pardon me, we're going to take one moment here, and I'm going to give this man moderator status. It is well deserved. All right. There he is. Boom. All right. Type for me. Say something, Mike. Yeah, you are correct. You are correct. Let's actually take a look at that. I'm curious. Here, so 848 damage, but with Trangs. 954. Not really that much. It's like decent, but like not too much. But yeah, so sorry, I didn't mean to get carried away there. But yeah, highly recommend this. At some point down the road, this will work just fine for a period of time. You're going to hit a brick wall with this against certain classes if you try to use only one set of items. I'll put it that way. Against everything. Eventually, you're going to want to expand your inventory. But to get you started, let's get you started. So, versus all, you're going to want that Suicide Branch. You're going to want that Koa. You want FCR Amulet Rings. You want an Eric. You want 20% FCR some kind of gloves. You want a Spirit. 35% FCR Spirit. That's all that honestly matters. Who gives a fuck about the other stats? You'll be fine. Boots, again, doesn't matter. Go get yourself a pair of these. They don't even have to be perfect. That's fine. Go get yourself a pair of Shadow Dancers. Like, it doesn't matter. There's many choices. You can even use Alders. Alders boots are cheap and effective. Great fire res, great run walk. I think you get mana regeneration upon taking damage. Why not? Oh yeah, don't forget the Enigma. You can't forget Enigma. Why not? Walking is also kind of fun, but I would say that's I would reserve that for certain classes. But here, that's your basic setup right there. Just get a couple grand charms. They don't have to be 44 or 45. They can be 20. They can be 30. You'll be able to do a lot more than you expect with that. And so, also, let me swap out the small charms here. So, in a versus all setup, let's talk about that as well. So, you'll notice I'm putting a lot of lightning resistance on and a couple fire resistance charms. In terms of what I prioritize and the overage that I'm really expecting in terms of pierce when I'm using my resistance setup, if I were to be in this one set of armor in all of these items, and that was forever, and that was how I had to play, and say you're starting out and you only have this stuff and you also only have to play this way, let's take a look at what you might use for resistances. So Wizard Spike, that puts me right over where I want to be in terms of pierce. Like, what can you really expect from opponents with pierce? FPK, you're probably going to get a friendly opponent. DFC, you might get somebody trying out a new build who's got like a 6-faceted shield or whatever on, and they're just stacked with pierce in terms of one of these resistances. Even a poison necro, or someone using plague with lower resistance, who else? I mean, I think an Aradin can even play in DFC. So I mean, you got to think about resistance caps to that effect. If you're only wearing one set of armor, you can see how Wizzy becomes immediately useful by comparison to this. And you'll notice I'm highlighting lightning resistance and just a touch of fire resistance. And that specifically right there, that's for assassins who like to fire blast. A lot of trap assassins, when they aggress when you're low HP, will start fire blasting as they chain stomp you and they land on you, which is immediate damage if you're in the direct vicinity. If they're directly stacked on your character, it'll hit immediately. Oh yeah, laser has a great point there with the life being absolutely crazy. On Alder's boots, you get like 50, I think, 50 HP raw. That's pretty crazy. Also, so lightning res, I want to be overcapped to a certain point at all times, mind you. That's why I'm hitting 207, even with the base 75. I think I've overshot it by 12 points for what I actually need in terms of what GM Pierce is. That's good-mannered Pierce, which is minus enemy resistance of whatever element. So an assassin in particular, that's what I'm looking out for. Or a smiter, a VT, somebody who's using Fist of the Heavens. You always want to have lightning resistance as your priority. And I would say secondary to that, fire resistance. And once you get to the point where if you're fighting up multiple classes and you're in a pub duel setting, you potentially might get attacked by many of these types of damages at one time. So that's one reason I recommend that. That's a starter setup right there. I'll clip this later so it'll be easy to find. I'll also put it on my YouTube, so no stress. I hope that this has been helpful in answering your questions. Feel free to ask more.